Welcome, everyone, to today's episode of the Medtech Business Academy's Women in Medtech series podcast. I am Colleen Patterson, so excited to be here today with my friends, as always, Barbara Strain, Abby Norfleet, and Stephanie Pitts. Also joining us today is special guest. You may remember Linda from one of her episodes on the main Medtech Business Academy podcast, but Linda Lybert is joining us here today. She's the founder and executive director of the Healthcare Services Institute. With over 25 years of experience, her focus has been on the role of surfaces in spreading healthcare, the role of how surfaces impact spreading healthcare associated infections. And we are so excited to have you here. Linda, when you were on the main Medtech Business Academy podcast, during that conversation, we heard so much about your expertise, your passion, and the issues that are currently being faced regarding surface disinfection. I remember sitting through that, listening to it, and being like, there are things that you were talking about that I had never even considered, for the fact that I have been in and around healthcare now, both from the Medtech side as well as the patient side, for a number of years. And, I'm so interested to lean more into that topic, but also to learn more about you as a person, how you've come into the position that you are in today. One of the things that I really found the most interesting when I was learning a little bit more about your story was that you had founded the Healthcare Services Institute, which I now think is about a year and a half old. Am I right?
No, it's 10 years old.
10 years old. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm just making up lies. But before you did that, there was also the Healthcare Services Summit. There was the Healthcare Service Consulting. Obviously this has been such a large part of your passion story for so many years. So why don't you take us a little bit about through that journey and what it meant to start the HSI, the Institute itself?
So, really all of this started purely by accident. I worked for DuPont and I sold Corian. And I had a very large goal to meet to sell product. And I walked into a hospital, not to sell countertops and sinks, but to understand, healthcare. Uh-huh. And from there, it just mushroomed. I learned about infection prevention. I started following facility managers, infection preventionists, et cetera. And when I was laid off from DuPont, I then went into consulting around surfaces. So my knowledge expanded tenfold on not just solid surface, but all surfaces. And the challenge of infection prevention and the ability to clean. I learned at that point in time that we're not building hospitals for cleaning and disinfection. And from there, I founded the Healthcare Services Institute a little over 10 years ago with an advisory board of 15 very well-known advisors throughout the world that were in manufacturing, academia, and actual clinicians in a healthcare facility. The summit was actually part of what we did is we had the summit. That's when we brought 30 people that never had talked to each other really other than socially together in a room. And we said, what are the issues? What are the challenges? And how are we going to address the issue of surfaces? And there were many aha moments in that. And everybody learned really quickly why there are so many challenges. And from there, we grew until last year. We actually ended up merging. We were invited by ISSA to merge with them. And that's what we did a little over a year and a half ago. And now our organization has expanded globally. And it also has now expanded into environmental hygiene as a whole. So still very much focused on surfaces, but we've expanded. So that's sort of the journey. It's been a lot of fun, very exciting.
I love that. Being able to create a global impact. People think of the idea of, how do I incite change? How do I incite a revolution of thinking? And a lot of people get caught up in the idea of if it's not everything, it can be nothing. Whereas I think one of the things that your story really highlights for me is the idea of just start. You start here and then you gain that momentum. And the ripples that are felt by that is how you get to that really globalized impact.
Yeah. Definitely. I'll never forget about probably 20 years ago now, I was at a conference And I mentioned to several colleagues, I said, you've talked about surfaces in this presentation, but you really didn't talk about surfaces. You didn't talk about the issues that existed. And the deputy director of ASHE was there and one other person, and they looked at me and they said, Linda, if we talk about surfaces, we have to do something about it. And where would we even begin? I mean, it's so massive. And your point, I said, we just begin. That's the only thing we have to do. So here we are now, 10 years later.
Barbara, talk to us a little bit about you have known Linda now for a number of years. Talk to us a little bit about how, meeting her has impacted your story.
It's also a kind of an interesting story. I wear a lot of my microbiology hats when I talk with Linda and things. Got involved through value analysis, and Linda was fascinated by how value analysis is done and what do we do about things about how do we clean reusable equipment? Do we take that into factors? How do we look at IFUs, instructions for use and things? And so we geeked out on a lot of those sorts of things. And so we wound up working together on a real world case study, which is an unbelievable study that we did. And we had access to everyone's work because they're going to stay anonymous throughout this story. So we've been working together now for about 5 years. She drug me along, not kicking and screaming, but voluntarily to be on their advisory council. And what Linda's been able to do now with ISSA, the backing of this global environmental services group across the world, is to really set up a healthcare platform so that we can really hone in on things. And so there's a variety of us that are coming from different places, whether they're nurses, IPs, architects, a variety of microbiologists and others, just trying to do some really great things. And so we're very energized, but Linda's the glue that holds us together and kind of orchestrates what we do. And it's just really exciting in healthcare. And so this is a really good platform for not only Linda, but all of us to sort of share what sort of things have motivated us to do what we do and how we think that we're hopefully helping healthcare today and stuff. So I'm really pleased that Linda was willing to come on this versus we had talked with her earlier on, you said, on the other Medtech med device group. So this is exciting. But Linda, I think you might talk a little bit about just in months, you've been able to do some of these global things, and she has an exciting trip coming up, and she's been planning for that. So if you want to sort of say some of the things that can help and see what people wind up getting into when they sort of put their feet and lean in.
So it has been really exciting. We have created a healthcare platform, and because ISSA is a global organization, we've been quickly able to bring in a global network. So we have 130 locations throughout the world. I went to Milan in May and did a presentation at a conference there and worked with a team there to begin to develop an advisory group. And then I am a week from Saturday headed to Sydney, Australia, to do more work there. We've had several hospitals reach out knowing that I'm going to be in their area to be able to sit down and work with them. What's been really challenging, it's not challenging. This is a global issue. It is not just a U.S. issue. It is global. The ability to clean and disinfect within our healthcare facilities, in particular, what a lot of people don't realize and what our mission has been is to talk about the fact that people overlook the type of surfaces that they have to clean and disinfect. And the majority of them are difficult, if not impossible, to clean. And they look at, surfaces as, oh, that's a bed, or, oh, that's an over bed table, or that's the operating room. But they don't hone into the fact that there are so many different surface materials and you can't clean them all the same way. And if you do, they're damaged. And what that does is it creates these microbial reservoirs for our microbes to live and breed and proliferate. And so our mission has really been to call attention to that. As we've grown the healthcare platform, which is, I invite everybody to visit our website. It's ISSA/healthcare. You'll see all of the different offerings that we have. It's not just training, but we have task forces. We have 7 of them. And this is really where we've been able to expand this mission, because these are different types of people. We really have a collaborative effort. So again, you get your manufacturers, you get your scientists, academia, and then most important are the clinicians that are actually dealing with this on a day-to-day basis. How do we clean these products and take care of them? And so that's really the movement that is happening with ISSA Healthcare and HSI, is how do we begin to address this critical issue of cleaning and disinfecting?
Linda, you've, in our short time together this morning, you've mentioned multiple times that really the power of networking and collaborating. You talked about it early on. You had this initial idea, you pulled together a group, you talked about it, as you work globally to strengthen your work, and then you just mentioned it again. So can you just share a little bit of your wisdom around the power of collaboration? Because it seems like that's deeply rooted in the work you're doing.
Definitely. So one of the things from the very first summit that we held is there are silos of expertise. You've got infection prevention, facility management, research, et cetera. And rarely do they connect and communicate. We were literally shocked with the very first summit that some of these people had never had a discussion. And I still today run into this when I talk to EVS professionals and say, how do you coordinate your processes and your protocols with infection prevention? I had one person actually say, oh my God, we don't do anything with infection prevention because usually when we do, it's because we've done something wrong. Well, no, you need to be proactive. And being proactive is by developing this collaborative effort of all of these different clinicians. One of the things that we discovered in that first summit was we asked 3 of the same questions. What is the surfaces issue? What are your challenges? And where do we go from here? And out of the 30 people that did these 5-10-minute lightning talks, every person answered those questions completely different. And so there are a lot of aha moments in that room. But until we start building these bridges and addressing all of the aspects together, the solutions that we come up with, and believe me, everybody goes to work every day with ideas for making it better. But until we build these bridges, the solutions aren't sustainable. They're not able to continue having success because all of these other factors start coming in. And so, that's when we started building the task forces. And in each one of our task forces, we have all these different areas of expertise that are contributing to finding a solution or building a program or creating a tool. You simply can't do it in silos of expertise anymore. And people are starting to realize that. That's why our infection rates have continued to be high, is because we don't have that collaboration and that networking and an understanding of, this broke down and, we had a number of infections as a result of that. Or we had this outbreak and here's what we did. Well, there were components of an expertise that was missing in finding the solution. And so that's our goal, is to bring it all together and let's start communicating about some of the issues and let's start looking at solutions together.
Linda, one of the comments that you made early on after kind of pulling together the summit and really saying, hey, this is something that has to be discussed, that really struck out to me and sent another little dagger through my heart, because we hear this a lot in healthcare, was well, if we start talking about it, that means we have to do something about it. And here you are all these years later, still having to talk about it. And that's why you've gotten so passionate about building these task forces. But what were some of those early on strategies that you truly deployed after that summit that kind of helped really see you take off? It's like, you're right, we need to talk about it, and it's a problem and it's going to cost money, but we're also costing lives. What were some of the strategies that you kind of went forward to help kind of create that ongoing motivation and passion in other people?
So I think the very beginning of time started with the design and construction of healthcare facilities. A couple of years ago, I was hired by a company to present to 37 different architect firms the issues of cleaning and disinfection in healthcare facilities. And what was shocking to me, and again, I'm not pointing fingers ever at anyone, it's just simply a lack of education and knowledge. What stuck out to me was, out of these 37 different architect firms that I presented to, not one of them in designing a facility or looking at products to put into their facility, not one of them reads the instructions for use for cleaning and disinfection before they specify the product. And so that was the first aha moment. And when I say that, I say every now and then somebody will say, yeah, I kind of read it, but that's the last thing I look at. I'm more concerned about the environment and having it being a healing environment. And my response was, how can you have a healing environment if you can't clean it? Mm-hmm. And so that's really where things started to happen. So we married infection prevention with some of these architect firms to start talking about, what are the challenges? What do you go through when you have to clean a facility? And the other thing that was happening that was not communicated to architect firms was products would be specified, and within a year of a expected 5-year life cycle, damage occurred. Well, it had everything to do with how that product was being cleaned and disinfected. They were using disinfectants that were not compatible with the surface materials, and there were a variety of different people that were cleaning these products, and they were not trained. And so that's when we all of a sudden started talking to the manufacturers about training people to clean their product, and not just training an EVS professional, but training the nurses and training the lab technicians. And, what are we looking at? So you can start to see where people started coming into the discussion and the movement was, okay, so now here's one of the issues: training, education, etc. So we built a program to help facilitate that and had our professionals start talking about it. And the more subject matter experts in their area of expertise that you bring in, the more education that is really, everybody starts to look at the bigger problem. We're not going to solve this issue in a year or two. I mean, this is a long-term issue, but we're starting to see people communicate about cleaning and disinfection. And one of the other issues we did, in fact, Barbara was part of this, we did a literature review right after the Institute was formed, and did 65 different search terms, because in research, a lot of times, and this is a frustration of the researchers even, is they're hired to research something, and when they start getting into the meat of it, the research project is done. So research is only as good as the scope of the project. Mm-hmm. And so some of our researchers were saying, we were just getting into the meat of the problem and the project was done because who hired us got the information they wanted, where we wanted to go much deeper. So there's a lot of room, but we ended up creating a task force because one of the search terms was the surface disinfection compatibility issue. And we learned that while manufacturers were actually doing some testing, they weren't doing consistent testing. So we weren't comparing apples to apples. And the process, even though there was a test method and a standard, the process was not being followed the same way by everyone. So data was skewed. We weren't getting accurate information. So one of our task forces was formed to create a consistent test method that would validate compatibility for surface materials. And we would test a variety of different types of disinfectants so that a healthcare facility could actually select the disinfectant that they needed to be able to clean a product. So with that, we ended up with clinicians, EVS professionals, microbiologists, and material manufacturers and scientists. So you can see where, as we started to discover that these were bigger issues than just one thing or a researcher, or we just added to that team and started creating solutions.
Linda, there's an element of your story here that I'm sitting here listening to your passion, which is so amazingly evident. But it sounds to me like this was all, the way you're conveying it today was effortless. The people just came together. The task force was made. We got to this stage. We just talked to the people, and they were there, ready to answer their phone and pick up the pitchforks and hunt down the monsters. But we all know that that's not how easy that was. There is obviously, there were setbacks. There was adversity that we faced. There were people that we talked to that were like, pound sand, I don't care. Not today, stranger. So, really hearing it today, it sounds like, yeah, just everybody came together and it was kumbaya. But talk a little bit more about the no's and hearing that no and knowing that what you're talking about is so important. But when it's important to you doesn't always mean that it's important in that moment to the people around you. So talk a little bit about kind of maintaining steadfast in your course when you're not getting that easy traction of, the immediate yes.
Well, first off, there's liability. And I'm going to use the case study that Barbara and I worked on together. Every hospital is afraid of the legal liability and ramifications of providing any of the data that we actually need or information. And so when we did the case study, which is a case study about cleaning and disinfecting medical devices and IFUs and some of the conflict that exists there, immediately you hit some roadblocks because, number one, we don't want our name to be used. Number two, I'm not going to speak because I'm afraid my job's going to be lost, so on and so forth. So what we did in that situation is we dropped all of the walls by saying, you are going to remain anonymous because you are just like every other hospital that's out there. We want to get to the root causes of these challenges that you face every day. And we had a medical device manufacturer they were phenomenal. It was a fairly new device. They were right away. Within 2 years, there was damage to these devices. It's a commonly used product or device in every single hospital facility. And they ran into the FDA testing issue where they weren't getting support on what kind of test method should we use. And then they get into the healthcare environment. And now we've got risk because we've got patients' lives that we're concerned about. We ended up, because everything was anonymous, we ended up learning things like how many different people a manufacturer called on, and the fact that even though they were calling on the same facility, that there was a lack of communication within the facility that addressed all of the different issues. Because when you buy a product in a healthcare facility, it's not just to make it easier for the doctor or for the patient. It's the ability to clean it. It's the ability to move it between. There's so many factors that came into this, and we were able to get to the root cause. But as you mentioned, there were a lot of no's to begin with. There was a lot of, we don't want to really reveal how much money it's cost our healthcare facility because we chose to use this device a little bit differently because infection prevention couldn't clean it the way we thought we should. So there's a lot of that. You just can't give up. It's like the Energizer Bunny. You start to realize there's more and more to this, and it creates more and more excitement around, okay, now we're getting to some of the root causes. And we can't talk to enough people, it seems, to be able to, really start building this consistently everywhere. So what works, we just go back to how we gathered all those people together. We still run into no's. The amount of money hospitals spend on repair and maintenance, on buying new devices before an expected end of a life cycle, the way patient care is done. I mean, there's so many factors that you really need to look at, and it's not the same in every hospital. So you don't have a roadmap, right? You don't have, oh, here's the protocol and the process. It's different everywhere. So we've just sort of learned, what are the questions you ask? How do we start having this conversation? Who do we bring into the picture? And then over time, we have now developed a group of people that we can use as references that have said, actually it helped, do whatever. We did some testing in one of the first hospitals I worked in many, many years ago about a wall outside of an operating room that gets damaged and destroyed and had to be replaced constantly. And we actually, in that research, we actually monitored what the cost was for repair and replacement, what the costs were for loss of use of that hallway, because when they do that repair, they shut that area off. And those numbers are not readily available. You have to be able to develop a relationship with the facility and know who actually has that revenue. We ended up saving that hospital about $350,000 a year for one wall that they continued to repair. And so it's really digging in and understanding what are the costs and getting to the right people who have those numbers, and then presenting all of that to administration or C-suite in a way that they would understand it. So,
I mean, that's some of the hard costs. But even if you think about, a lot of our audience is in medical manufacturing or the actual med device side, that if you think about like the intangibles, like brand reputation of, right, hey, my infusion pump or my bed is having these problems, and people are, they wear out so much faster than the last one, and it's not my product with my beautiful IFU is actually really good. It's the improper maintenance of that. But nobody points a finger at their own hospital being like, oh, well, it was cleaned improperly. It's that my thing was bad. From Abby and Stephanie, who are currently on the medical device side, is that something that you guys are even talking about now?
I think what you're hinting at, Colleen, is kind of the potential of operator error that we have a hard time overcoming when you're wanting to serve the customer while also ensuring that best practices are being followed. So there'll be a lot of times when we will hear something kind of off the wall come out of an account, and it's kind of like, okay, well, just because we introduced one new little component to something that you're already supposed to be doing on best practice, let's really go back to evaluating of, was this really something that came from a quality standpoint of view from us as the manufacturer, or do we need to go back and have a conversation with the operator or the clinician that was, currently using the device? And so I will say that is kind of a daily conversation that we have on the manufacturing side of things. Linda, just listening to you talk, one of the things that kind of had me wondering and thinking about, most of what I've spent my career in has been more on the disposable side. So not capital equipment, not, anything that's usually a more of a long-term or permanent fixture within the hospital that's used for multiple patient use or anything like that. What kind of work has actually been done on a guideline or ISO type thing within the development of medical devices or equipment or services that are being deployed in hospitals that actually might maybe one day ensure a standardization of evaluation, that we're continuing to put things in properly into these hospitals that can be disinfected, sterilized in the right way that maybe will long-term impact that. As you said, this isn't going to be a 1 to 2 year fix. This is something we're decades off. I just said to somebody yesterday, I walk into hospitals and cringe that I still see carpet sometimes. And I'm just like, whoever thought carpet in hospitals was a great idea. Sorry, I'm sure it looked great back when that was the fad, but no thanks anymore. Is there any work that's being done on that to maybe ensure that like all this work that you're currently doing and bringing to light, and these facilities that are willing to work with you on it, to kind of show like, hey, we'll stay anonymous, but this is really a real problem? Is there work that's truly being done to create that guideline or standard that hospitals should be following and manufacturers together?
Yeah, and you just brought up this is one of the areas where we're getting a lot of no's, is building a collaborative effort between manufacturers and clinicians, because a lot of times what happens, and this works both ways, and we've seen it both ways. To your point, in the healthcare environment, the instructions for use, or the way you care for something or you dispose of something or whatever, is different from what you planned or the manufacturer planned for them to do. Mm-hmm. And until you actually walk into a room, and I'm going to use my example of a trauma room. When you walk into a trauma room that has just had a trauma, I have a photograph of one I use in a lot of my talks. You suddenly start to realize that in that room, the amount of product that is there, be it medical devices, be it disposable, be whatever, has now been contaminated. And there are, well, in the one picture I have, there are over 40 different IFUs that have to be followed for cleaning and disinfecting those areas. That EVS person or nurse or whoever that's tasked with that is not always the same. And so they have 20 minutes to turn that room around and follow 40 some different IFUs in the process of cleaning and disinfecting and trying to do it without damage. So there's a serious challenge here in a healthcare setting that a lot of times manufacturers don't understand until it's been presented to them. What needs to happen is the bridge needs to be built between how do we work together to develop a proper cleaning and disinfection protocol or process for our products in an environment where we've got a fast room turnover time, and are these products compatible with the disinfectants that are required to be used? Because one of the things that often doesn't happen is a lot of times the manufacturer doesn't understand that different disinfectants are selected based on the microbe that they're trying to kill. So they're not always using the same disinfectants because they can't. And so I think, again, I would love to have you be on one of our task forces to help us begin to build that bridge, because we really need to bring people together to talk about what are truly the challenges. And the other challenge within the healthcare setting, I was talking to a director of ED one day. She's a director of a children's hospital. And she said, Linda, during cold and flu season, and this is after the Accountable Care Act, so this plays into it too, regulatory compliance. But she said, during cold and flu season in the ED, we nurses are tasked with turning rooms over. Our primary focus is patient care. And she said, literally, all we will do is maybe wipe down the railings, flip the sheet over, and bring the next patient in. And we wonder why infection rates are so bad. So there are broken pieces that if we could just bring together those manufacturers and these healthcare professionals tasked with cleaning and disinfection, we could really make a difference. And you asked about standards. We would love to create some standards, but in order to do that, we need to bring in regulatory, we need to bring in manufacturers, and we need to bring in the professionals that are cleaning and disinfecting. And it's not just EVS to build that. And I would love to build it, but we're getting no's right now. So anyway, you can help with that, or we would love to build that bridge.
Yeah,
it's a pretty big call to action.
Yeah, at the end of every presentation we give, we have a call to action. So because you get people excited and they sometimes feel almost powerless because it seems so large. So one of the things, Linda, I think that's important through the work, and we've had another summit since the other one, something called COVID kind of jumped in the middle of a consistent cycle of that. But it's really the collaboration, as Stephanie was saying, but it's also how do we systematically identify the key gaps? Yeah. And then how do we go after, hopefully it's the easy wins to get to the steps, you crawl, you walk, and then we're going to get there. but people have to be patient but passionate that this can be done. So, Linda, I think one of the things that might be important is how identifying those gaps, and then how do you choose or go after the right people to help do that, because you can't do it all, because you got a lot of global responsibility and things. So what are some key things about closing those gaps and having those effective people to help with those projects?
Well, I think it's first identifying the gaps. And we've done that through case studies. We've done that through our summit. Our summit actually, when you attend one of our summits, you're not coming to listen to people talk to you about their latest research and things like that. Typically, we have a topic, we have lightning talks, and then we go into the development of task forces. So they identify what are the top issues, and then the task forces go to work. They come together. They set a mission or goals for a year, and that's where we start. And typically, it's been interesting. The summits do just draw a wide range of people. It's not, when you look at the professional organizations, they draw their area of expertise, infection prevention, operating room professionals, et cetera. The summit is sort of a conglomerate of all of those types of professionals that have a passion around making a difference. And that's why our summit is so different from many of the other conferences. It's we bring them together and we focus on whatever the topic is. And I don't know if I answered your question, Barbara, but, really that's, we have had success with finding people that have passion, that are willing to work on our task forces and make a difference. And it's not an overnight thing. They just have to be willing to commit and move forward.
Linda, I'm gonna drive us home. Listening to you today, many times we hear from innovators in the medtech space, how do they do like what you've done over the last, 10 plus years? And just listening to you today allows me to reflect on a book that I love. It's called The Creator's Code. It's written by Amy Wilkinson. And in the book, they interviewed all these entrepreneurs, across big companies. And there were 6 trends that were consistent in allowing them to be successful. And you have reflected on these today. So I just want to call this out because there's a recipe here, right? Because I think many people are going to listen to this and go, how did she deploy this? How did she, get this going? Like what drove her? You found a gap. You drove for daylight, which means no matter the obstacle that got in front of you, you kept driving, you kept looking ahead, you avoided the potholes, you went around things. There's one that's called you fly the OODA loop. You try something, you reevaluate, you try it again. You don't allow failure to set you back. You just continue to collaborate to figure it out. You fail wisely, you network minds, which to me is one of the greatest strengths that you've identified is this incredible network of collaboration. And then you give back. You're here with us today and you're sharing your journey. So I don't really have a question. I just want to share from my lens, you are an incredible entrepreneur in healthcare, and you've demonstrated how through your passion of trying to make a difference, you have been able to do so, and you've done so globally. So I just wanted to say thank you for being with us today, and thank you for all the work you've done. I've certainly learned a lot. I didn't know there was this much going on around surfaces in the background. So I just want to say thank you for being with us today. And with that, Colleen, I'll turn it over to you to close us out.
Thank you for joining us today, Linda. I mean, your passion for surface disinfection and ultimately it comes back to patient safety has resonated out. It's really inspiring to talk to you because you get a lot of people, we talk to a lot of people who are like, yeah, I do this, but your enthusiasm is at a 10. And bringing that level of energy is not surprising to see that you've been as successful in this space as you have. I think some of my favorite tidbits tidbits, and this is mirroring items that Stephanie just shared about finding your community that shares your passion. It starts with one other person, and then it multiplies. Not being afraid to tackle, I can't tackle anything because I have to tackle everything. Starting somewhere, waiting, and there is an element of you get that momentum going and it starts to become bigger than any one person. We create that global impact by starting with one day, one person, one conversation, only one yes, and everything comes from that. So not being afraid to really put yourself out there. It has been such a pleasure to have you join us today. For our audience, thank you as always for tuning in. And if you have not already done so, be sure to subscribe to never miss a future episode of the Medtech Business Academy. And it has been so wonderful having everyone with us today. Thank you.